Okay, we're back. Let's talk about Sternberg's three factors of intelligence. Now, I kind of talked about Sternberg recently when I talked about the his three factors of love, right? His triarchic theory of love. So he has three factors of intelligence. He argues that intelligence can be represented through analytic intelligence, which is the kind of skill that is really necessary for remembering things effectively, storing them in your memory, retrieving them from your memory, and then also analyzing things, evaluating the components, comparing it to other things, those kinds of skills are all housed in analytic intelligence. Creativity, which we've talked about before, um, you know, with creativity, you need to generate novel solutions that are useful, outside the box kind of thinking, divergent, like we talked about before. Um, so with creativity, we find, skills being incorporated in there. Values can be part of creativity. Our desires can be part of creativity because we don't have to be just finding the solution of the problem like we might be doing with analytic. In creativity, we're sort of throwing everything out and seeing which one would be the most useful. And then practical intelligence. This is the kind of intelligence that's really necessary for managing daily life. So, practical intelligence would be, important for, personal hygiene, feeding yourself, um, getting a job. Like all those things are part of practical intelligence. Like not having the skills for the job, but knowing how to get a job. Right, like all that process. So Sternberg talked about how you can be high in one of these types of intelligence and low in the others, or high in all of them or low in all of them, and then it can be a mix or a match. And one of the things he's been really pressuring colleges and universities to do lately is to abandon standardized testing in favor of measures that would help to assess the analytic, creative, and practical intelligence of the applicants. And of course, he's talking about like maybe different tests for undergraduates who really need more maybe analytic capabilities, or maybe certain majors need more creativity or need to be more practical or whatever. So he really thinks it's important to maybe tailor it to the different majors as well as levels of training. Like graduate schools, on average, expect more creativity out of their applicants, but a lot of times the standardized tests favor people who are high on analytic intelligence. And so they may not be very good at creativity when they get there. And then they end up not doing well because they don't fulfill the demands of their degree very well. And so he's arguing to get rid of standardized testing and substitute much more flexible assessments of these three different kinds of intelligence. And it really would require programs to look inside themselves and figure out what skills are really actually necessary for their candidates to be successful in this career. And that self-reflection is probably where the stumbling block is, because a lot of programs don't really know. They're just kind of going with the status quo, and they just know it must be important, but they don't know why. And so we're kind of stuck right now with not having replaced standardized testing like the SAT or the ACT. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about expert cognition. People who really know a lot about a particular area. Experts sometimes are looked at as having, they must be really just generally smart. But it turns out that to be an expert at something, you don't have to be generally smart. You have to just know a lot about whatever it is you know about, right? So you can have very specific knowledge and facility with whatever topic you're being measured in. Expert cognition is a lot more intuitive than concrete. They really rely heavily on their past experience to help them to solve the current problem. They take into account the context that's present right now to help them to modify the answer that they would give instead of just giving a rote answer every time. They look at what's going on right now. This is in contrast to novices in an area who are much more likely to just sort of fall back on the rules. They're much more likely to follow the formal procedures. Now, one of the most common subjects for testing expert cognition has been chess. And I would love to give you some excellent chess examples for those of you who play chess, but I don't play chess and I can't figure it out and I'm awful at it. And so I just really haven't learned. But what I can tell you is that a lot of times masters at chess can't verbalize how they knew that this was the right place to put the piece. And so that it almost makes it look like they're just following some kind of rule. But the truth is they're not really following a rule, because a lot of times the best chess player will come up with a counter or an attack that no one else has ever thought of, that everybody else would have done this other thing. Everybody else knows what the rule would have been or what the smart thing would have been to do. And the chess master saw something else. And so novices can get to a certain point just by adhering to rules and the formal procedures. But to get to that next level, you have to really be much more intuitive in your understanding of what's going on. Experts tend to display a lot more automatic processing in their area of expertise. So what that means is when they're in a familiar context, they are very likely to just sort of act without thinking in their area of expertise. Like they just know what comes next. I have found that in my subject matter of psychology, that when a student asks a particular question, almost always it's something that I already know about and I can immediately answer. When I was a new teacher, there was a lot more of, you know what, I'm going to have to get back to you on that. I'm going to have to look that up. I'm not exactly sure. But I have like very intuitive and automatic access to a lot of the field. And now with, several decades of extensive experience in the field that I didn't have when I first started, right? The thing that makes it great as an expert is that the more you know and the more automatic things can become, the less effort you actually have to expend doing the thing that you're an expert in, right? So it doesn't take as much thought. I was watching Magnus Carlsen play chess against somebody who I don't know his name in some kind of chess tournament in Dubai. And my son's a big chess guy. He loves playing chess. And so we were watching it together. And what was tripping me out is that the person whose turn it was, and it was both sides, they would sometimes not know what to do. And so they would sit there and stare for so long at the chessboard that the other player would get up, go get something to drink, wander away. They were expending a lot of effort trying to beat each other. So I think the expert looks like really effortless when they're in the proper context, when everything's going the way that they expect it to go, when, like that. But when you're up, in this case with chess, up against somebody who's like probably as good as you, I think this person, I think they kept tying. They kept coming to a stalemate. And so when you're up against somebody who's as good as you, sort of that automatic processing starts to go out the window when it's a competition like that. But in other situations for the expert, it becomes so automatic that they can actually do other things while they're thinking about this thing that they're so deeply expert in, because it's become just sort of natural. They can do it intuitively and don't really have to think about it. I'll give you a concrete example that you might be an expert in if you've been driving for any length of time. You can drive and get into some kind of reverie where you're thinking about other things, and next thing you know, you're on your driveway and you're like, oh my gosh, I was going to stop and get gas on the way home, and now I'm already home. And how did I do that? I thought I was paying attention. Well, if you've been driving a long time, you have become an expert in driving. And so you don't really have to expend much effort on it. And so you can free up your mind to do other stuff, including forgetting to stop at the gas station. But it's an example of how if you are expert enough in something, you can actually spend less effort on that thing than you would have to do otherwise. Expert cognition is strategic. They have more strategies available to them. So if they run up against a roadblock, they're like, okay, I know what else to do. They have better strategies. So compared to a novice who might be like, well, I'll just try this one thing and I don't know what else to do. And the one thing I know how to do is kind of remedial anyway. The expert has more and better strategies, so they're less likely to get tripped up. And experts are much more flexible in their cognition. They're more creative. They're more curious about their subject matter. They respond really well when unexpected things happen within their area of expertise. So it's really super important just to remember that this is all within the area of expertise. So if I pull that chess master out and say, okay, what I need you to do now is operate this heavy equipment and dig a swimming pool in my backyard without, hitting any pipes or doing anything wrong. That's probably, they're not going to be general experts. They're going to be like, this is not my area of expertise, right? Only within your area do you get all these benefits of expertise? So, it's not general, you're just smarter than other people. It is you're better at other people at this particular task. And that's because I put in the hours, I put in the effort, I have the native interest. Like, this is how I came to be an expert at this, is because this is what I've been doing. And this is much more likely to be displayed in people as they get older, right? Middle adulthood is going to be full of becoming aware that you're an expert at stuff. I discovered I'm an expert at clothes washing when my teenage children got big enough. I'm like, you guys could be running the laundry too. And they literally didn't know what series of buttons to push on the washing machine to get it to wash their clothes. And I was like, I don't even have to think about what button. I'm like, you guys, you go push this, that's the on button. Push this, that's the normal wash button. Push this, that's the normal soil button, and push this 3 times and it'll take it to cold. Ta-da, shut the lid, off you go. It did not occur to me that I was an expert in clothes washing, but it's something that, with expertise, with experience, you oftentimes become an expert at something. I'm laughing at my kids for not knowing, but so, expertise. Circumstances contribute to when determining whether you are going to become an expert at something. Like I said, I didn't know I had become a laundry expert, but apparently through, circumstances, I became that. Training, right? So like having gone through training at work, or having gone through college, or having gone through whatever, you're accumulating the kind of knowledge that's going to ultimately feed into you becoming an expert at something. Having a natural talent at something. I have a sneaking suspicion that Magnus Carlsen had some natural talent with chess, right? Like that made it fun for him when he was first starting. When I'm first starting and I have zero understanding of what's going on, it just feels like punishment. I have no skill at it. Having some ability in the area. I see Magnus Carlsen example, but also, when you talk about expertise on content, having some ability with math, or having some ability with writing, or having some ability in a certain area is going to make it more likely that you become an expert in that area. Sorry about how light the font is on this display, if it looks light to you guys. Practice is another factor that is super important for expertise. It could be deliberate practice. You may play all the chess games, so that when it's time for a match, you really know how to do it. But it also could be kind of repetitious practice, like maybe it's your job. I'm thinking of people at what's really popping into my mind is code enforcement employees, people who come out to the house to determine whether your electrical is hooked up right, or the roof was put on right, or whatever. For them, they know exactly what they're looking for because they've looked for it so many times, and they've seen so many that were done wrong that it's easy to tell whether it was done right because they have practice with it. The other thing that's coming to mind is right now the Winter Olympics are on, and I've been watching figure skating because that's always the fun thing to watch. And the narrators, the commentators, they are former figure skaters. And so as they're watching, they know what the person just did. Before I've even registered that they completed it, they're already commenting on it. Partly is they probably watched the practice. They probably literally have practiced with this exact performance, but they also have enough experience and practice in the field that they know exactly all the moves and what they're called and how to describe them and those kinds of things. And practice is important. And then finally, age is one of the biggest factors in expertise because it takes so much practice. They say on average, it takes about 10 years of experience with something for you to become a true expert in that thing. So whatever you might pick, it probably takes about 10 years for you to get to the point where people would call you an expert. Now, one of the things about older experts is that as they age, and when we get into older adulthood, you're going to start to see, the impacts of aging on cognition and things. They'll, within their area of expertise, they will seem like they're experiencing less deterioration. And a lot of times that's because they can selectively optimize their performance with compensation for any deficits that they're starting to experience. And so they look just as competent as they did, 30 years ago within their area of expertise. All right, let's stop here and we will finish up this chapter with a very protracted discussion about work because let's face it, that occupies a lot of our adulthood. So I'll see you in the next recording.